Hello there all my lovely jewelry makers, I'm Christina at CSLdesigns, and in today's tutorial I'm going to show you how to make this flat beaded knitting spool bracelet. Now we only have beads on one side, so the back is nice and flat and comfortable against the skin, and it's also very flexible, so comfortable to wear. And of course you can really personalize this depending on what materials you choose to put together, so if you want to learn how to make it, then keep watching. So these are the materials that we're going to need. The wire that I'm using here is a 0.4mm regular round silver coated copper wire. And then the beads that I'm using in this case here are some 4mm rounds, and these specific beads are just agate gemstone rounds in different colours. Of course you can choose whatever kind of colourway or what kind of bead that you want to. And then of course we do also need our tool, so I'm using this knitting spool here. This specific one has 6 prongs on it, so that's what we need for this design. And alongside that I'm using my crochet hook here to help maneuver the wires. So this specific one I'm using is a 1.3mm, but it doesn't have to be that specific size. It's just on the smaller side of a crochet hook to be able to get in and grab onto the wire. And then of course we do need our findings as well. So to finish off the ends I'm going to be using these ribbon ends here, and alongside those as well I'm going to use my E6000 glue to make it nice and strong and secure. And those ribbon ends have little loops where we can attach our findings, so I'm using a lost dog claw clasp and extender chain, and of course some jump rings to put it together. So I'm going to leave the material list and useful links in the description box down below so you can check that out. Otherwise, let's get it all together and let's get started. Now what we're going to be doing throughout this is working with the wire still attached to the reel, but before we start doing any work we need to add our beads onto the wire. So that's what I'm just going to do first of all. So you literally just want to add all your beads here onto the wire, and then just let them drop down. And rather add too many beads than too few, because you can always not use them all, whereas if we haven't added enough but we're not done yet, obviously that'll be a little bit of a problem. So just add quite a few beads onto your length of wire here, and then just let the beads drop all the way down to sit close to the reel so they're there for when we need them. And then we'll just release a decent length of wire to begin with here that we can then start working with and get right back to the very end of the wire. And then it's time to grab our knitting spool here, and what I like to do is have a little piece of wire attached to one of the prongs. It's just as a bit of a marker to know that this is my starting point, and every time I start a new round I know that that's the starting point for it. So that's all it's for. You can choose to do that or not, but then otherwise we need to take the very end of the wire and put it down through the hole right there in the middle, and so it just comes out at the bottom there, because we can then just use that to hold on to a little bit and also help pull it down through as we're gonna be making the braid here. And then first of all we need to attach the wire, so I'm gonna do that by again using that marker, starting with that prong, going around, so from the inside there, from the back you could say of the prong, and then around the right side, looping around it towards left, and then to the back again. And now what I'm going to do is, because this is the marker prong, I'd like to use that one as, instead of going to the very next prong there, I'm going to skip that one and then go to the one after that. So just rotate the spool, and then I'm going to loop around that prong in the same direction, so right to left. Then I'm going to do the very next one after that, and then here again the next one. Now I'm going to skip again just like we did on the other side, but then do the one after that, and then you can see I'm back to the very first one. So I can just do that one again, so loop around that, making sure the loop now is above the other one, so we now technically have 2 loops right above each other on that prong. But then you can see at the top here what we are doing, instead of using all the prongs, like I said, we're skipping one on each side there, and it's kind of creating a rectangle in the middle as opposed to using all the prongs. Now what we need to do is start looping these loops that are on the prongs over each other, which is what creates the braid. So we're going to need the crochet hook here. So this is the first one. So we have 2 loops, like I said, and just obviously ignore the marker there. We don't need to do anything with that other than just leave it there. Now we need to hook onto the bottom of those loops with the crochet hook from below. And then this case here, obviously it's the first one, so it's technically the wire that's coming straight out of the bottom there. So it's loose enough, it's not really tight on there, but just kind of hold on to it a little bit at the bottom so it doesn't get pulled out. But then loosen it a little bit by pulling it out and then bringing it up and over the prong and into the middle, making sure the other loop stays on there. And then basically this is all we're going to be doing. So I'm just going to do a few rounds first of all before we start adding any beads in, so don't worry about the beads just yet. But then again, I'm holding onto the bottom of the wire there with my finger. So we've done that one, moving on to the next one, and again ignore the next prong, loop around the next one we're using. Now this again has 2 loops on it. I'm going to go from underneath and grab the bottom prong, bring it out a bit, and then up and over the prong and into the middle, and then just let it kind of float there. Because it's wire, we don't need to worry about anything coming undone. It's going to hold its shape. And the next one here, again same thing. What I also like to start doing then is kind of holding on to the wire here just to have control. Again, grabbing the bottom prong up and over, and the next one. So this is technically the last one in the round, and you can see we've now looped all of them up and over into the middle there once. Now what I then like to do is just pull a little bit on the wire here coming out of the bottom, not too much but just a little bit, to bring the wires further down up there so we can continue. We got the more space to work with. Again, I'm going to then technically start a new round because I'm at my marker, but what I want to do is just a couple of rounds here, just like this, like I said, with no beads. So I've done about 3 rounds now with just the wire here, and you can see it's starting to kind of grow downwards into the spool. So I'm going to start a new round, and now I'm also going to start adding beads in. So first of all, I'm just going to go around this prong here with the marker and just bring that up and over. And now where I'm going to add beads is on this long side here. So the first long side after the marker, and that's also something to use the marker for, is know when that point is. Obviously once you add the beads in, the beads themselves will kind of tell you where you need to add them. But then what I'm going to do is just get down to my beads further down the wire, and I want to just drop down 3 beads and then let them drop all the way into the middle there to sit, and then make sure they stay there. Just kind of use your finger to then loop around the next prong, which then automatically holds those beads in place. But then otherwise it's doing the exact same thing, taking the bottom loop up, over and into the middle, and again let it just hang out there, continuing around, finishing off this round, looping up and over. And now on this side here, the long side, I'm not going to add beads in because I just want beads on one side. So obviously one side is going to have the beads and the other side it's going to be more flat, because that's going to just sit against the skin on the wrist. And then the last prong in this round, as you can see, that's the other long side. And then I'm back to my marker, which means starting a new round. So just go around that first, loop up and over, and now here we're at the point where I need to add in beads. So I grab the next 3 beads on my wire, let them drop all the way down to go into the middle there, sit right on top of the other ones, and otherwise Make sure they stay there, loop around the prong, and then just continue with the same technique. Again, finish off this round, one prong at a time, until we're back to the marker, which starts off a new round. And again, I'm just gonna pull a bit on the wire down here, not pull hard, but just gently, which then pulls down a bit on the wires up top and gives us more space to work with. But then otherwise, it's just starting a new round, and it's literally now just repeating over and over again. And I'm going to be adding the beads in to this specific place in the round, in every round, basically until we have enough length. Now, bearing in mind that once we've finished the braid and removed it, the braid is going to then get a little bit longer than here. So when you're measuring the length that you have on the spool, take into account that it's going to get a little bit elongated afterwards. So now, just in my last round with beads here, all I'm then going to do is basically repeat the beginning. So we need to do a few rounds where there's no beads, just to kind of have an end. So starting the next round there, and literally just continue doing the same technique. But now where we would add beads in, just bring the wire across without beads. And then just do it for the same amount of rounds as we did on the other end. So in my case here, I did it about 3 rounds with no beads. So that's what I'm going to do here as well. And once we have that, what I'm going to do is get my wire cutters, because we're now done using the wire. So I'm just going to go down the wire a little bit, so just leave a bit of an end and cut it off. And then I just have this end of the wire, so I'm going to use that to finish off the end here with. So what I'm going to do is just go to the next round, or the next prong, sorry, that I was due to use. So this is starting a new round again. But now, instead of taking this wire around the prong and then creating a new loop and then bringing the bottom loop up and over into the middle, what I'm going to do is leave the wire coming just behind the prong there without making that loop. And then I'm going to bring the loop that's on the prong, so the only loop that's on the prong, up and over into the middle, and I'm going to leave my crochet hook through it and then go back and grab onto the wire, so the end of the wire that's just coming straight behind, and then pull it through. So like that. I'm going to move on to the next prong with the loop on, and again release that loop, go through it with the crochet hook, grab onto the end of the wire and pull it straight through. And basically this is how we're releasing the braid from the spool, but at the same time securing the ends. So these final loops, and the last one, just hooking onto that and then bringing the wire through from back to front. And we've done all of them, so now that's basically released my braid, so I can pull it all the way through and then just take the spool, put it out of the way, and here we have our braid. So we then have the open end here, which is where I just released it from the spool. What I'm then going to do is kind of keep hold gently of the end of the braid and then grab the wire and just gently start to pull it and basically tighten it, and that just closes up the end here, so like that. And we are left with this braid. Now it's not completely done yet because I still kind of want to just adjust it a little bit. So what I like to do is start to gently kind of settle it in place, and also if you have a bit of a gap here on the side between the loops that are on that side, I like to kind of push them closer together, just gently, a bit at a time, going down the braid. So basically running it through my fingers with gentle pressure. So obviously don't go in and squeeze it flat, but just gently going like this all the way down and settling the whole thing in place. And that's also what elongates it a little bit. I'm kind of just flattening it a tiny bit. And then the braid is more settled and done. And we'll get the whole thing more finished looking and symmetrical as well. So all that's left to really do is deal with the ends. So I'm just going to show you on one end because it's the same on both. Now what we have here is obviously a length of wire coming out from the end of the braid, and you'll find that we have kind of holes going through, loops, and then get ones that kind of are lining up there. And I'm going to take the wire and literally just bring it around kind of several of these wires and through the loops there, and coil this wire around them. And I'm going to do that a few times, kind of moving from this side where it's coming out from over towards the other side. And it doesn't have to be neat or anything, because obviously, like I said, the ends are going to be inside the ribbon end. So it's really just for security and creating more of an end so we can add the ribbon ends here safely. So just bringing it across towards the other side. And then once we are getting there, just a few more. Like that, that's good. Then I'm just going to take my wire cutters, flush cutters, cut off the excess of this wire here at the end, so we get rid of that. Because it's very secure now, it's not going to come undone, unravel, because we've wrapped it around so many times. So squeeze that end in, and then we just need to kind of fix this end so it's going to fit inside of the ribbon end. So what we can do is have one handy, but then I'm just going to kind of shape this in place. So first of all, this part that I just wrapped, I want to make it more straight. Because obviously the shape of the ribbon end itself is kind of straight and elongated like that. So that's basically what I want to end up matching. So just maneuver your wire here to fit that. So straighten the end a bit like that, and then also flatten it down, because the part that's going to go inside the ribbon end obviously needs to be as flat as possible so we have the least bulk, so we can actually tighten the ribbon end on top. Now let's just have a little try. So put the ribbon end over the end of the wire and see if it's going to fit, and it looks like that will pretty well. So this is in the time where I get my glue, and I just want to add a little bit on a toothpick here. I'm going to use a toothpick to apply it with. So add some onto the toothpick or whatever you're using, and we need to get it inside the ribbon end first of all, and basically cover kind of the inside walls. Now we don't need to completely fill it up because it's going to get squeezed down, and obviously the end we're going to need to put wires in there as well. So just a decent coating of glue. And then I also like to take what's kind of left on my toothpick, or if you need to add some more, and just put it around the end of the braid here. So get right into the nooks and crannies between the wires, because when we then put the two together, and obviously it dries, they're going to really adhere nicely together. So add the ribbon end over the top and just hold it in place, and then start to squeeze it flat. Now I like to kind of just do a bit at a time to make sure it stays where I want it to sit. because then you can always, just before completely squeezing it down, do your final adjustments and then go in and do a nice tight squeeze. And also just from the sides. So there we go, and of course you just need to then leave the glue to dry, and that'll be a really nice strong bond. And of course as well, repeat on the other end too. And then when we finished off both ends, we got the loops in the ribbon ends there where we can attach our findings. And then the bracelet is finished and ready to wear, and it gives a really nice effect because it's very tactile. So obviously the braid itself is pretty strong even though we're using a fine wire, but it still has a lot of movement in it, so it's going to sit comfortably and nicely around your wrist. So as you can see, nice movement. And this is obviously the one that I made in the video, so this is using the 4mm rounds. You can equally use 3mm rounds. Now what I did is, for the 4mm rounds I used 3 per round when I added beads in. For the 3mm rounds I used 4 per round when I added the beads in, so just for reference. And again, you can then see the different effect that you get. So it's personal preference, obviously, what you prefer. So that's how you make this flat beaded wire spool bracelet. And of course you can really play around with the look depending what beads you choose to add. So you can always check out my channel for more knitting spool tutorials and many other things as well. Otherwise, I really hope you enjoyed this one. Thank you so much for watching it, and I'll see you in the next one.